I've shown how to make some tables in the past, but those were for just kind of a generic everywhere setting. Today I'm going to show you how I make some tables set specifically for a tavern. So for today's craft, we're going to use a few different pieces, starting with some Jenga blocks from the Dollar Tree. These are going to be the base. Then we're going to use a tongue depressor or medium-sized craft stick, a couple of coffee stirrer sticks, and a thick-cut barbecue skewer that is kind of rectangular shaped. So we're going to start off by making the tabletop. Now, to make this, we're going to use our coffee sticks. We're going to use 2 sticks, and we're going to cut them into 2-inch lengths. We're going to need 4 of them in total. This will make them a little bit more narrow than the tables that I've made in the past, and it'll kind of help to fit into a little bit more cramped setting like a tavern. So now I'm going to take the tongue depressor, which I cut to a 1.5-inch length, and this is going to go on the bottom of the tabletop, just to kind of hold everything together. Now, taking the 4 coffee sticks and arranging them, it doesn't really matter if they're perfectly lined up. A little bit of variance is just going to add some extra character. I'm going to take the tongue depressor and apply a thin coating of wood glue. You can also use PVA or tacky glue for this. And I'm just applying a thin layer over the entirety of one side. Once that's done, I set it onto the 4 coffee sticks as centered as I can get it. Now, I get my wood glue from the Dollar Tree, and it holds pretty nicely in very, very little time, but I'm still going to set this aside to let it dry so that it doesn't kind of fall apart on me. So while that's drying, I'm going to take the Jenga blocks. Now, I've used these in the past to make the legs for the tables, but I wanted a little bit smaller, so I took a saw and cut the Jenga blocks in half. This is going to give us a much slimmer profile on the bottom of the tabletop. Now, to create the actual legs for the table, we're going to take our barbecue skewer and cut them so that they kind of fit along with the profile of the Jenga block. Okay, so now that our tabletop is dry, it's time to start attaching and making our legs. So using a little bit more wood glue, I'm going to take the Jenga block and do a kind of thin strip of glue and then just kind of press it centered onto the bottom. Alright, and once that's kind of tacked together, I don't want it to go anywhere, so I'm going to use a dollar store little clamp that I found and just kind of hold it together while I clean up the extra glue that has kind of seeped out from the sides with a toothpick. And in about 5 or so minutes, this will be fully dry and ready to go on to the next step. Alright, so I cut the barbecue skewers off camera. They're going to go along the 4 corners, and we're going to affix them with a little bit more wood glue just to kind of make sure that everything stays perfectly in place and never comes off. Now, we don't need a ton of wood glue for this. In fact, what I've just put down is probably going to be a little bit too much. Alright, so now that that's on, I'm going to make sure that it's placed correctly, and I want it to overhang the side of the Jenga block just a little bit to kind of give a little bit of depth to the small side of the table. Now, if your table legs are a little bit long and the table wobbles a little bit, once everything's fully dry, you can use a utility knife or some shears to kind of trim the legs a little bit from the bottom and kind of line everything up. So I'm just going to repeat the pattern with the legs all the way around off camera, and once that's dry, we can move on to painting. So once it was dry, I took it out and gave it a full coat of flat brown camouflage paint from Krylon. very strongly resembles a raw umber color, which is very, very helpful when painting wood objects, and doesn't take all that long to dry. I think this took maybe 20 minutes at most. So now I'm going to use a raw sienna from Artist Loft that I got from Michaels, and do a just simple dry brush over the whole piece. This is going to allow all of the wood grain lines from the coffee sticks to show through and really give a lot of character, which takes absolutely no effort to achieve. Since the coffee sticks are made out of relatively cheap wood, they've got a lot of grain structure already, so it makes it very convenient as a crafter. I don't have to get a tool to add the wood grain lines since they already have them. Now you can go a little bit lighter on the dry brush on the Jangle block to apply a little bit of an impression of depth to the underside. I'm not super concerned about that, since anytime I use these, it's going to be primarily viewed from the top, so the most that's going to be seen of the side is a little bit of a glance from players who might be sitting across the table, and at that point there's not going to be really that much of a noticeable difference anyway. Now, I'm going to stop at the raw sienna phase and not apply any other paints, but if you wanted a more weathered appearance, you could do something like a light tan or a warm gray or something like that, just to kind of nick at the edges and give the impression of a little bit more wear and tear. But in all honesty, I think this is pretty good for an indoor table, and since I'm not planning on using these very much outside, it should be pretty good. So a lot of old tables have these kind of like metal straps and bands on them to kind of hold the wood together. So we're going to recreate that using this. Now this is a 2¼ inch long piece of a HVAC aluminum tape. This is really nice stuff. I got it at Lowe's for like $5-10 or something like that. And I've got a ton of it left, and it's really, really nice for a lot of crafts like this. Now the important thing to know is once you've placed it, make sure it's the place that you want it, because you're not going to be able to pull it up without stripping paint or breaking wood. I made that mistake a couple of times in the past. So I'm just tacking it down, just kind of pressing it in and using it to kind of form fit around the table to kind of give the impression that the strap goes all the way around and everything is held in place by it. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. I use a pair of tweezers to kind of pull the backing off the tape. You can kind of use anything, but I find that tweezers are really, really easy to use for this. And again, wrap around, press it into any cracks and crevices that it's going to be going into, and we should be good. And this is not going to come off anytime soon. The glue on this is really, really strong, and it's designed to be waterproof, so you don't really have to worry about it ever coming loose on its own. So now, using the tip of the tweezers, I'm just going to poke an indentation kind of over the center of each of the wooden planks to kind of give the impression that there's like nail holes and this has kind of been riveted into place or nailed into place. So now the straps are a little bit shiny, so we're going to dull that down a little bit with a little bit of Null Oil. I'm doing a fairly generous coat, and I eventually go back off camera with a second coat just to make sure that it applies in an even layer. And this is going to dull down the shininess and just kind of help to unify it with the piece. Alright, and just like that, our table is done. And now, I think it's time for a little narrative. As you finish your meal, the plate shudders and shakes on the table. Jumping back in surprise, you avoid being bit as the plate grows legs and jumps off the table, running across the room. The other patrons jump up in alarm as the plate shifts form again and is lost in the commotion. The bartender laughs a hearty laugh and tells everyone to relax, announcing the start of the daily challenge. Find the mimic and win a free round of drinks. Roll for perception. Alright everyone, that's going to be it for today. Tune in next week where I show you how to make these little chairs and benches to use along with your tables. Thank you everyone for watching. Please hit that like button, subscribe for future content, comment in the comments section, let me know how I'm doing, and we will see everyone next episode.